On the NewsChannel 5 network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm NewsChannel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. The 111th Tennessee General Assembly comes back to Nashville next week for its second year of work. What will be the big issues and challenges facing lawmakers? Somebody who very likely knows exactly what all those things are is the Speaker of the State Senate and Tennessee's Lieutenant Governor, Randy McNally. He's our guest on Inside Politics this week.
Glad to be here with you.
Governor, thank you for coming in. Appreciate you being here. The duty for the legislature always every year is to pass a balanced state operating budget, but what do you see as the top issues beyond that the lawmakers have to deal with?
Well, and sometimes we don't pass a structurally balanced budget, and we did that in, I believe, 2001, and we lost our credit rating and subsequently got it back. But there'll be a number of issues. The governor will present us with a number of different bills that we'll have to deal with.
One thing that kind of came out of the blue this week was the governor's executive order that institutes a 12-week paid family leave program for employees in the executive branch, which is, I think, most of the state employees. It's about 30,000. That bill had been kicking around the legislature for years, mostly backed by Democrats, never went anywhere. Now, all of a sudden, March 1st, it's going to be available. What's changed?
Well, I think the governor's support. That means
does make a difference, doesn't it?
That makes a great deal of difference.
Is it a matter for the states? It's not as expensive. I think I read that the state officials from finance basically said it's only about $1 million for them to do that. I would have thought it'd have a much larger fiscal note.
And I guess it really depends on the size of the entity that has to enact it. A small business or a small local government might be much more difficult for them to fill in with. They'd have to hire temporary employees.
And moving in that direction by the state, I mean, you compete. The state competes, particularly here in Nashville and other major cities. They compete for the same employees, and this is going to be a major advantage for the state to be able to recruit and keep employees.
It will be.
Have you heard anything else as well from the private sector about that? Because they're going to have to be looking at doing this. May become the new normal to have this kind of paid family leave.
Well, I have heard some concerns from private businesses about it, particularly small business.
So is this anything the legislature has to do about it? Will you be extending it on to other parts of state government, or some others have to take their own actions on, like for higher education or others?
Well, with higher education, I think it'll be THEC and the individual colleges that will have to interact to do that. Then the court system, we can't really mandate that on the courts, so they'll have to either come to an agreement to do it, and then would have to probably pass a law to do it, and the legislature itself would have to deal with that issue.
Another issue that's come to the fore in the last couple of weeks is the governor's decision to tell the federal government that the state continues to want to receive refugees. He's getting some pushback from other members of your party. Do you expect this is going to be a major issue in the legislature with efforts to try to modify, if not overrule that?
I don't know that we could overrule it, and as far as modification, I'd really have to do a lot of research on that, because the president gave each governor the authority to say whether they would accept refugees or not. And as I understand it, the governor's going to do it on a one-year basis, trial basis, and also I think he believes that the current administration's doing a lot better job at vetting who's coming into the country.
Now, Senator Hensley has a bill that requires a 2/3 vote by both local legislative bodies and by the General Assembly to allow refugees to resettle in any area in the state. That seems a pretty high standard to reach. Do you think that bill has much chance even in your chamber?
You know, I hate to predict anything about future bills and how far they'll go, but you know, the other thing that would be examined about anything in that vein is the constitutionality issues. And I know Senator Hensley's you know, a very important member of the Senate and serves on the Senate Finance Committee, and I'm sure he's probably checked out some of that.
As I recall, before you became Speaker of the Senate, your predecessor Ron Ramsey pushed through legislation that basically had the legislature hire an outside legal firm to pursue a bill in the federal courts that would basically keep the federal government from sending any refugees here. That bill has lost every time it's come up for a ruling in any of the courts. Now it waits for the Supreme Court. Do you think the Supreme Court, do you plan to appeal to the state Supreme Court? And what do you think your chances are, since again you've not been successful in the round of trying to do anything about it?
Yeah, I'd really have to talk to the Attorney General about that, and I don't know that it's a bill rather than it's an unfunded mandate from the federal government, and that by bill I mean legislation. If you're talking about a bill that the federal government owes us money for the people they're sending us, then I think that, you know, that's probably something that should be looked at.
Are you surprised that lawsuit has not gone anywhere when it's gone into the federal courts?
I am, given the discussions that we had about it initially. I would think that, you know, if the federal government ought to at least fund a good part of the cost of that.
There's also a situation we talked about what's going on with the refugees. We talked about some other things. Any of these problems that you've had, little disagreements that you've had with the governor, are these having any long-term impact on your relationship with the governor? And you have a new speaker this time, this would be his first full session to be in there. Everybody still getting along well at this point?
Oh, we are. We can disagree and still be friends, I think, with the governor, and he always listens. He's a very good listener, and he always takes the feelings of the legislature, I think, to heart.
There's another particular area of controversy, which is these Family First monies that the state has received for a number of years. Mm-hmm. They don't have to go back to the federal government. Their money is supposed to be used for people that to help them get back on their feet after they've been on the Family First program. Mm-hmm. It's like almost $500 million that's in there. And at first, the Lee administration said, well, we need to save that for a rainy day, even though there's a separate rainy day fund that's pretty large as well for the state. Then members of the legislature started coming up with their plans. Then the governor came up with a plan, and then everybody kind of got a little cross with each other that they all had their own plans and hadn't talked to each other.
I don't know about cross with each other, but there were really two things that created that problem. One was during the recession, where we were basically just kind of shoving the money out the door, and we weren't really checking to make sure it went to deserving organizations and deserving people. And we found that some of the money was really being abused. It was being used in clubs and things like that. So we tightened up the restrictions, and at the same time the number of people applying for those programs, because the economy is so good, has gone down.
But you think some of that surplus is going to be spent in the next, appropriated by the legislature?
I think some of it will remain in reserve for that particular program, because if we hit a downturn, our spending will go back up.
Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally is our guest on Inside Politics. The legislature comes back to town to begin the second session of the 111th Tennessee General Assembly. Back to continue our conversation after this break.